everybody, let's get started. Happy Lunar New Year to everybody. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Fulbright Forum. My name is Ben Harris and I'm the Executive Assistant of the Korean American Educational Commission. Tonight's presentation will last about 50 minutes. We ask that you hold all questions until the Q&A that will take place at the end. Afterward, please stay and enjoy light refreshments prepared by the KAC staff. I'm pleased tonight to introduce Fulbright Senior Scholar Dr. Perry Hamalis. Out of 8 senior scholars this year, Professor Hamalis is the only one with the title of lecturer researcher, meaning that in addition to a teaching schedule, Professor Hamalis is also conducting research. As a theologian, Professor Hamalis has been examining the World Council of Church's most recent General Assembly in October and November of 2013 in Busan. 2 years after the event, Professor Hamalis hopes to gain greater insight on the implications of this meeting on the Orthodox Church in Korea and beyond. Here until the end of July, Professor Hamalis is speaking to us now at the midpoint of his grant to give us preliminary findings. Professor Hamalis serves as the Underwood Visiting Professor at the Yonsei University United Graduate School of Theology. In this capacity, Professor Hamalis has taught students both at Yonsei's main campus in Shincheon and at the Underwood International College in Songdo. On leave from his home institution at North Central College in Illinois, where he is the Cecilia Schneller-Mueller Professor of Religion, we are grateful for Professor Hamalis' service to the Fulbright program and are pleased to have him here tonight. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Hamalis.
Thank you so much, Ben. And that was a very kind introduction, a very generous one. Director Shim, thank you for being here tonight as well. And thank you all for coming out this evening. I know we still have a bit of the New Year's blues or something like that, right? But it's great to have you. I appreciate your support and your interest. As Ben said, I was awarded a Senior Scholar Teaching and Research Fellowship. So I'm here for a full year with my family, who's in the back, and also offering undergraduate and graduate courses at Yonsei, as Ben said. And the project that I've been working on is related to the area of ecumenical theology. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. But really I wanted to just start by saying a little bit about how I arrived at this project. The roots of the research really trace back to about 2007. Just making sure you're awake there. When I first started working with the World Council of Churches. At that time, the World Council of Churches Faith and Order Commission had begun a major study called Moral Discernment in the Churches. And at that time, and they invited me to join the study as an outside consultant on that project. The WCC became keenly aware in this issue because it is the world's largest and most well-known institution for working for visible unity and common witness among all Christian denominations. And its members have come to realize that divisions between the churches and also within the churches were increasingly stemming from moral differences and not as much from doctrinal or theological disagreements. They became interested in me because there are very few of us in the world, actually, who specialize in Eastern Orthodox ethics. And the Orthodox churches play a relatively large role in the World Council of Churches. Frequently, they are viewed by other member churches as historically necessary and rooted, but sometimes frustratingly conservative in their presence. The Moral Discernment study lasted for about 5 years, and it produced a text that was discussed during the WCC's 10th General Assembly, which was held in Busan in the fall of 2013. And I participated in that assembly, both as a delegate of the Eastern Orthodox Ecumenical Patriarchate, and as a WCC moderator for discussions on the document Moral Discernment in the Churches. And then following the assembly, I became increasingly interested in the event's significance and its implications, especially for the small but dynamic Orthodox community that's here in South Korea. So a couple questions arose to spark my project while I'm here. First, how did the 10th General Assembly, how did its Korean location, how did the 10th General Assembly's Korean location impact the Korean Orthodox community? What effects, if any, did the Assembly in Busan have upon relationships between the Orthodox Church of Korea and other Christian communities of Korea? And what effects, if any, did it have upon the Orthodox Church of Korea's relationship with Orthodox Christians from other regions of the world who had all gathered at this event? So those are some of the questions that have been guiding my reflection and my research. As an ethicist, my methodology combines more textual sources and semi-structured interviews than some of the more commonly quantitative social scientific research methods. So I'll just mention that up front. And I'd like to proceed tonight under 5 main headings. Key players and terms, the significance of a WCC General Assembly in Busan. Can you all see? Sorry, I can scoot over a little bit. You still got it? Is that okay? The significance of WCC General Assembly in Busan, pre-assembly developments, both between the Orthodox Church and other Christian communities, and also within the Orthodox churches. The 10th General Assembly itself and its implications, and then some of the post-assembly consequences or developments. Again, both between churches and within the Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox churches. Because of time limits and the fact that my research is ongoing, the claims that I offer here are selective and provisional. Nonetheless, I think it's already become clear to me that this line of inquiry is promising, and it merits scholarly attention both in my own work, in my own efforts, and certainly beyond the completion of this small fragment of study. So, let's consider some of the key players and terms. And this I wouldn't typically do, but I figured most of you might be utterly unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. So this is a bit of a primer on ecumenical theology. So first, the World Council of Churches. The World Council of Churches, or the WCC, was established in 1948 in the aftermath of World War II. And it quickly became the largest, most inclusive, and best known Christian ecumenical organization. The word ecumenical, what does that mean? Basically, it means that its primary aim is to promote visible unity, common witness, and collaboration in serving others among the world's many Christian churches. So that's what is meant typically by ecumenical. Different Christian groups working together toward those goals. The WCC is not itself a church or a denomination, nor is its primary concern interreligious dialogue, that is to say, dialogue between, for example, Christians and Buddhists. Rather, the WCC is a voluntary fellowship of churches or denominations who share a basic Christian identity and desire to work together toward greater Christian unity. The WCC brings together churches and denominations that are based in more than 110 different nations, and there are currently 345 member churches. And these include many Anglican, Baptist, Lutheran, Methodist, Reform, and independent churches, as well as most of the world's Orthodox Christians, both Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox. Altogether, these member churches represent over 500 million Christians worldwide. From the time of its inception, the World Council of Churches inception, the Roman Catholic Church has chosen not to become a full member. However, the Roman Catholic Church participates deeply in many of the WCC's activities and initiatives, especially in theological dialogue. The Roman Catholic Church is a full voting participant in the WCC's Faith and Order Commission, which is the group that focuses most directly on doctrine and working toward Christian unity on matters of doctrine and theology. So they're fully involved as a Roman Catholic church, especially in those initiatives. So if we add together the number of Christians that are represented by the WCC, roughly 500 million, and the number of Christians in the Roman Catholic Church, roughly 1.1 billion, the result is over 1.6 billion people, or about 75% of those who self-identify as Christians worldwide. So I think this fact alone speaks to the significance and the potential of the WCC in collaboration with the Roman Catholic Church. And the two highest leadership positions within the WCC are the General Secretary and the moderator of the Central Committee. And the people that currently hold those positions are here. The moderator, just recently elected, is Dr. Agnes Abum, and the WCC General Secretary is Reverend Dr. Olaf Tibet. Dr. Abium is from the Anglican Church of Kenya, and Reverend Dr. Tibet is from the Church of Norway. Part of the WCC's role is to encourage and support local ecumenical dialogue. Here in Korea, the National Council of Churches is the local ecumenical organization that is affiliated directly with the World Council of Churches. And it currently includes 9 member churches, as well as 5 member organizations and other organizations that are associated with it as well. Like the WCC, the National Council of Churches has as its purpose promoting unity among the churches and common Christian witness in response to a range of contemporary issues and social needs. So for example, NCCK has organized ongoing initiatives on just peacemaking, on nuclear disarmament, on environmental protection, caring for the homeless, and economic justice amidst neoliberal economic thinking. These are just some of many initiatives and committees that are ongoing within the National Council of Churches Korea. They continue, as a fellowship of churches, to take concrete steps to advance, to advocate for North-South reconciliation and reunification as well. And for a just response to the history of sexual slavery and comfort women, and for other issues like landmine removal and support of landmine victims, and again, other locally centered social concerns. So they are deeply involved in many of the high-profile issues within Korean society in terms of moral issues and human rights topics. So again, here's the list of the members and member organizations. So another key player in my research is Orthodox Christianity. It's probably a little bit small for you to see, but hopefully you can see some of it. But Orthodox Christianity, which together with the Roman Catholic Church and Protestant Christianity, is one of the 3 major expressions of Christian faith. The Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Christians understand themselves as members of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, which has maintained an unbroken continuity in belief and practice with the historical church founded at Pentecost. This is their self-understanding. Today there are between 250 and 350 million Orthodox Christians worldwide. This is from the Pew Foundation's estimates. This was from 2011, calculates 260.38 million Orthodox Christians worldwide. And you see that the largest concentrations are in Russia and Eastern Europe, Ethiopia, I think those numbers have changed somewhat since 2011. But Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Greece, so Eastern Europe, Balkans are the primary, and Russia obviously is the biggest player in terms of numbers. So this makes the Eastern Orthodox Church, or it makes the Orthodox Church overall the second largest Christian church in the world after Roman Catholicism. Within Orthodoxy, there is a distinction between the Eastern Orthodox and what's called the Oriental Orthodox, which may seem like a matter of simple semantics, but it's just making a distinction to identify two families of Orthodox churches that split or broke communion with each other in the late 5th century over doctrinal difference in the area of Christology. In the 11th century, the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church split in what is referred to as the Great Schism, typically dated to 1054. And then roughly, as I'm sure many of you know, 500 years after this, the Protestant Reformation occurred, which began, leading to the further splintering of Christian denominations around the world. So sometimes it's helpful to think about it like every 500 years there was like a major split. So that gives you a little bit of a framework, historical framework. And here you can see a list of the Eastern Orthodox churches and the Oriental Orthodox family. So, okay. Say a little bit more about that in a moment, but finally, the Orthodox metropolis of Korea is another major player in my work, and it has under its care all of the Eastern Orthodox Christians, Orthodox parishes, and Orthodox monasteries on the Korean Peninsula. Presently, this includes approximately 5,000 members and 10 parishes, including one in Pyongyang, and 2 monasteries as well. In addition, many Oriental Orthodox who are living in Korea, Ethiopian background or Coptic background, for example, attend and are welcomed at parishes of the Orthodox metropolis of Korea, since they have not to date established any of their own parishes. So basically, on the Korean Peninsula, the Eastern Orthodox family is represented, but there are no parishes that represent the Oriental Orthodox here in Korea. The Korean Orthodox Church is under the spiritual leadership of its local hierarch, who's pictured in the center here, His Eminence Metropolitan or Archbishop Ambrosios, who has been serving the Orthodox community in Korea since 1998 and has been in his current role since 2008. Metropolitan Ambrosios is also a full-time professor at Hanguk University of Foreign Studies and a highly regarded scholar of church history, patristic theology, and Greek studies. He's actually in the Greek studies department at Hanguk. He's been extraordinarily helpful meeting with me for multiple interviews and connecting me with his colleagues within the Orthodox Church and within the National Council of Churches Korea. As Metropolitan Ambrosios and others have stated, there are two characteristics of the Korean Orthodox Church that are especially important to note in this context within the World Council of Churches event. And first, like Orthodox communities in other parts of the diaspora, or those parts of the world that are not within the regional jurisdiction of one of the 14 churches that are listed here, so the Orthodox communities that are in this diaspora, for example, Korea, the Orthodox Metropolitan of Korea is under the care of the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, which historically holds the honor of being first among equals amidst the 14 Eastern Orthodox churches. So the head, basically, of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople is jurisdictionally responsible for the churches that are in the diaspora, or the churches that are in regions of the world that are not yet developed to the point to become their own autocephalous or self-head electing churches. So this is the first thing to keep in mind. Therefore, His Eminence Metropolitan Ambrosios reports to and serves in his role with the blessing of His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. Second, unlike other Orthodox communities in the diaspora, there is only one Orthodox bishop in Korea. And he has pastoral responsibility for all Orthodox Christians who are living in Korea. Those living in Korea who are Korean, Russian, Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Romanian, or any other ethnic background are all under the care of the same local bishop. In other contexts in the world, this is not the case. In the United States, Canada, Australia, Central and South America, for example, there are Orthodox bishops, parish, priests, and parishes from more than one of the 14 autocephalous churches that exist in the same city. So, for example, in Chicago, where I live, there is a Greek Orthodox bishop, and there is a Russian Orthodox bishop, and an Antiochian Orthodox bishop, etc. And even though they are all in full sacramental communion with each other, and they all fully recognize each other as Orthodox Christians, they do not function as a single Orthodox church in those regions. And this is very significant. The reality of multiple jurisdictions is a major problem within the Eastern Orthodox Church that's actually going to be one of the biggest agenda items for a recently announced Great Synod that's being held at the end of June, the first such event in over 1,000 years, one could say, within the Orthodox world. That's scheduled for all the heads of and their representatives of the 14 autocephalous churches to meet and discuss a variety of issues. So, if you're not doing anything and you can get yourself to Crete in June, you'd be in for some pretty interesting theological dialogue. So, okay. So this issue of multiple jurisdictions developed for historical and political reasons, despite its inconsistency with the Church's canon law. And it's really the most insidious contributor to pan-Orthodox unity and common witness. So what I'm trying to say is that the Orthodox community in Korea is a model for worldwide orthodoxy as it pertains to this issue of the diaspora, because Orthodox Christians from all ethnic backgrounds are united, and they celebrate the Eucharist together, and they worship in multiple languages, and they are all under the spiritual care of a single bishop. Okay. All right, let's move on a little bit here. The significance of the WCC's assembly being held in Busan. There's much that could be said here, but say a few things. First, within the structure of the World Council of Churches, a General Assembly is the highest governing body, and it's convened about once every 7 or 8 years. Its purpose is to unite in common prayer and to review programs, issue public statements, determine WCC policies, and elect presidents and a central committee that oversee the Council's work until the next assembly. In 2005, largely in response to repeated strong objections by Orthodox members of the WCC shifted its decision-making process from a simple majority to a consensus model. This is a really big deal. And basically, the Eastern Orthodox churches felt that they were being outvoted, simply being outvoted on a range of issues that was calling into question their willingness to continue as members of the WCC. So they basically said, if you want us to continue as members of the WCC, and we want to continue, we need to change the decision-making process because we feel like our concerns are not being sufficiently heard or acknowledged or discussed. So, it was kind of a crisis within the WCC, and in 2005, there was this special committee that was convened in order to discuss the concerns of the Orthodox, and one of the two major decisions of that committee was to move to a consensus decision-making model. And the first General Assembly at which this model was implemented was Porto Alegre in 2006, and then it was also practiced in Busan in 2013. The way that this works is the delegates raise either a yellow, an orange or a blue card expressing their vote either of yes or no. So you can kind of see the voting happening here in this picture on the left. On August 31st, 2009, the WCC Central Committee determined by vote that the 10th Assembly would be held in Busan. And from what I found, many factors played into this decision. Some were principled and some were practical. There was a strong desire among WCC leaders, for sure, to hold an assembly in East Asia. The only assembly that had been held anywhere in Asia previously was in New Delhi in 1961. So they felt like they were well overdue for an Asian host city. Another factor, was certainly the rising global prominence of Korean Christianity. And this is especially the case in the area of missions and evangelism, where Korea is second only to the United States in the number of Christian missionaries that are being sent abroad, which is really an astonishing fact. I mean, it's really striking. So within the WCC, Christianity in Korea is looked at as the most vibrant and most glowing sign of hope for the sustenance and growth of Christianity in all of Asia, really. It's really quite remarkable. So this was another major factor in the decision to select Busan. Financial considerations also played a major part. With the economic crisis and numbers declining in many European churches, there is a big crunch for finances for the WCC. And the Korean host proposal the local Korean churches were willing to pick up a huge proportion of the expenses to host the conference here. So that obviously played a major part in the negotiation or in the discussion. And then, of course, just the increasing recognition of East Asia's significance in religious, social, and political dynamics permeated the discussions. There is one very big factor that many people don't really pick up on, although I'm sure all of you would be thinking about this, and that's the reality of North-South division and the lack of human rights in the North. Keep in mind that at the time, 2009, when the decision was made, the relations between North and South were still relatively good. I mean, yes, the Sunshine Policy had been formally abandoned, but I think the hope of reconciliation and reunification was still relatively strong. And the WCC has a long history of advocating for social justice, and it played most notably a prominent role in the anti-apartheid campaign in South Africa. It's kind of its biggest success story in terms of social change for the WCC. So I mean, I would hypothesize that the General Secretary and the leadership of the WCC really wanted to bring about a significant change in North-South relations as a result of this assembly, or through the hosting of this assembly. And there were some very small gestures of exchange and movement, but I would say on that front, by and large, it was almost a total failure. I mean, not just because of the current situation, but even just in terms of how things developed during the conference itself and leading up to the conference, where there's such a big push by the WCC to try to facilitate this. Okay, so for example, after the nuclear tests last month, Secretary Tet made the following statement publicly. He said, "For more than 30 years, the World Council of Churches has been engaged in opening doors for encounter and dialogue between North and South Koreans. The WCC's 10th Assembly, held in Busan in 2013, affirmed that, quote, 'It is our prayer that the vision and dream of all Koreans and their common aspiration for healing, reconciliation, peace, and reunification may be fulfilled.'" Still quoting. "The WCC also has a long history of principled opposition to nuclear arms and supports the recent humanitarian initiative toward a global legal ban on such unconscionable weapons of mass destruction. Provocation does not offer a path to peace. In this situation, dialogue is more important and more urgently required than ever." Very much in the spirit of the ecumenical movement, right? It's all about dialogue. Dialogue can heal the world. And there's a lot of legitimacy, of course, in this approach, but some would say, it hasn't really panned out in terms of concrete results, at least with respect to the relations between North and South Korea. So other hopes that were only partially fulfilled, I think we could say, were some like those that were expressed by Professor Jilil Tark of Busan Presbyterian University. He said, "The 10th WCC Assembly must be different from the Olympics, the World Cup, and the G20 Summit that were held in Korea. It should not be a luxurious event to show the financial growth or political influence of the Korean Church. The 10th WCC Assembly needs to be a simple gathering showing the humble responsibility of Christians." End quote. Okay, so let me move on. Pre-assembly developments and their implications for the Orthodox community in particular. So let's shift now to share a selection of results from my interviews and document study pertaining to the impact on the Orthodox community itself within the Korean context. First, in terms of Orthodox ecumenical relations, the Orthodox Church's relationship to other Christian communities here in Korea. I mean, the Orthodox community is very small here. We said 5,000 is an estimate, and it's even more limited in terms of human resources. Highly educated people that are trained in ecumenical dialogue, that are able to represent their church's position, official position on various theological and social issues. So it was a really big stretch for the Orthodox community of Korea to take on this challenge of being integrally involved in the WCC General Assembly process. But they rose to the challenge, I think, in ways that are really pretty impressive. His Eminence Metropolitan Ambrosios said that there were two especially noteworthy ways that these pre-assembly developments impacted the Orthodox community. First is that in 2011, the Orthodox Church of Korea became full member of NCCK. They were not previously, they had been many years ago a full member and then broke that relationship for many years. I wasn't able to get the exact date on that. But in 2011, they were, and this was really at the personal request of the General Secretary of the NCCK, General Secretary Kim Young-ju, the Methodist Church of Korea, who went to Metropolitan Ambrose and basically said, we need the Orthodox Church in order to be the National Council of Churches Korea with integrity. And the Orthodox Church accepted this invitation, and since then has been deeply involved in the NCCK, the National Council of Churches Korea. So this was one major development that was really a preliminary implication of the Busan being the host city. And a second is that the Orthodox community was deeply involved with the planning and leading of communal prayer. Every day of the assembly included 2 formal prayer services and multiple smaller prayer or worship activities. And because of the Orthodox Church's history as a high church tradition, or quite elaborate in its worship and ritual. It played a very prominent role in the preparations of the liturgics committee or the worship committee for the WCC. This is also because this document, that the decision to move to the consensus model that I mentioned earlier, was the other major implication for the Orthodox, was that they said that we object to the language of shared worship, and we're only willing to use the language of communal prayer, which may, again, not seem like a significant distinction, but for some more conservative members of the Orthodox churches, that is, worship is referred to in the context of Eucharistic communion, and common prayer is not. So the Orthodox Church is willing to participate fully in common prayer, but not in Eucharistic service. And many of the worship services at previous WCC assemblies included Eucharistic offering. So some very different views on what the Eucharist means in the different Christian churches. So those were a couple things that I'll highlight. I see that the time is going quickly. So there were lots of meetings, lots of people that visited the Orthodox Church and collaborated with Orthodox leading up to the assembly itself. In terms of intra-Orthodox leading up to the assembly, there wasn't a whole lot to report on this. There was one major pre-assembly consultation that happened in Greece to study, to kind of prepare, all the Orthodox churches to prepare for the upcoming General Assembly. And unfortunately, or disappointingly, none of the representatives of the Orthodox Church in Korea were actually invited to participate in that discussion. So I think that was definitely disappointing from within the intra-Orthodox perspective. You'd think you'd want representatives of the host context to be present for these pre-assembly consultations. Okay, let me move on. The General Assembly itself, again, lots to say. I mean, there's so much here, but in terms of the Orthodox Church's relationship to other Christian communities, there were roughly 5,000 people that attended the General Assembly in Busan. It was a big event, and those people who participated fully, witnessed things like the blessing of the Tok service that the Orthodox community led. They passed by the Orthodox booth. They purchased many books and publications and icons that had been produced by and were being offered by the Orthodox community there in the exhibit hall. And they interacted with Orthodox Christians from around the world in a variety of committees and prayer services and Bible studies and other assembly activities. So for many, if you think about it, I mean, if you only have roughly 5,000 Orthodox Christians in Korea, most Koreans have absolutely no idea what the Orthodox Church is and no direct experience of anyone who is Orthodox. So the hosting and the presence of Orthodox representatives from all over the world in such a massive number at the World Council of Churches, really communicated very strongly the connection between this very small local community and this very, very large worldwide community of Orthodox Christians. So that was, I think, a very significant development within the assembly itself. Also, one of the Eastern Orthodox priests, Father Daniel Na, who serves a community in Incheon, was one of the featured speakers at a plenary session on Asia. And he addressed topics pertaining to religious freedom, situation in North Korea, and also persecution of Christians in Syria and the Middle East and North Africa. So it was a very timely and very moving, I think, event. I mean, it would have been unimaginable 20 years ago to see an Eastern Orthodox person on this massive stage before 5,000 people in Busan, addressing the community there. He also spoke directly to the issue of the one Orthodox parish that does exist in North Korea. We can say more about that if you'd like. In terms of the intra-Orthodox implications of the conference, as you can see, I have two images here. One is an image of worship. These young women are from the Indian Orthodox Church. They visited the Orthodox community that's depicted there in Busan. And then on the picture on the right is a meeting between all of the representatives of the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox that occurred during the conference itself, during the assembly itself. That session was extremely important, and in terms of the Orthodox intra-relationship. One of the bishops there from the United States commented, this is Alexander Golitsyn, he said, "The Orthodox would rarely meet were it not for the WCC, which in the shape of the Central Committee brings representatives of the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox together yearly." So just the fact that the Orthodox meet with each other in the context of the WCC is a really big positive development. Another point that I'll just mention is that Busan was really a turning point for relations between the Orthodox metropolis of Korea, Metropolitan of Rosios, which is under the ecumenical patriarchate, and the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarchate of Moscow. As you probably know, Russia has a bit of a history here, and the first Orthodox churches that were built here in Korea in 1900 were by missionaries from Russia, or from the Russian Moscow Patriarchate. So there has been a bit of a tension and even something of a rivalry because during the time of the communist regime in the Soviet Union, the Church of Russia was providing absolutely no support, spiritual or material support of their flock here in Korea. And at that time, the faithful here in Korea sought to go under the spiritual care of the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople and to leave the Moscow jurisdiction. That happened, and then since then there have been tensions and efforts. The Russian patriarchate is very, very close to the Putin regime, very closely tied to the Putin regime, and has historically used its embassies as ways to spread Russian Orthodox presence in different countries. So again, there's a lot more that I could say about this, but basically what happened in Busan is the delegation from Russia, from the Russian Moscow Patriarchate, saw how well organized, how collaborative, how visible, and how respected the Orthodox community of Korea was by their fellow Christians. And this really sent a very strong message that basically said, we don't have a place here. We can, the people of Russian background or Ukrainian background or whatever who are in Korea, their needs are being met, and we don't need to be involved in this. So, you never know what the future holds, but this was a very, very significant development within the Eastern Orthodox family. Okay, the time is running out quickly, so let me just say a quick word about post-assembly developments. So, what can we say in terms of the implications of Busan 10th Assembly for relations between the Orthodox and the other Christian churches since the completion of the event itself? I think everything that I've read and the people with whom I've spoken have all collaborated the claim that there's been a general elevation of recognition and respect by fellow Christian leaders, realizing that Orthodoxy is a huge presence worldwide and is historically essential to the ecumenical movement here in Korea. That's something that, again, until you see, these kind of odd-looking bishops and people wearing long beards and unusual headwear and things like this descending upon your city in Busan and interacting with you, it's hard to understand, what is this community and what are they all about. So I think there was a very, very strong impact in terms of just awareness about the worldwide Orthodox Church. That's one thing. The second is, and this is also very significant, the National Council of Churches Korea, after the Busan Assembly, established a Faith and Order Commission of their own a year ago. And this Faith and Order, as you may recall, focuses on doctrinal or theological dialogue. this was something that the Orthodox here in Korea have been advocating very strongly for. They don't want to do ecumenical dialogue just for social justice issues. They want to do ecumenical dialogue to try to promote unity, theological unity among Christians as well. So the development of the establishment of the Faith and Order Commission by the NCCK in 2014, or so I guess 2 years ago now, but was quite significant, and that also includes the Roman Catholic Church, as it does at the worldwide level. And then one third implication that I will identify is that the National Council of Churches team, the National Council of Churches sent a team of 15 representatives to go to Gamgangsan in North Korea to meet there. That was in November of 2015. And there was, part of that delegation was a representative of the Orthodox Church of Korea, Father Andonios Lim, who was there representing Metropolitan Ambrose, and was again able to meet with the counterpart, the director of WCC, the director of the National Council of Churches in North Korea, which does actually exist in some form, big question marks, but was able to meet and basically trying to reestablish a relationship there so that the Orthodox community will actually be able to hold services openly in the church that they have there in Pyongyang, and that was also, I think, a very significant development. So there are other things I could mention, but I see the time and I want to allow some time for questions. So let me just really close here. I think we can say that the Orthodox Church here in Korea, after the Busan Assembly, is moving. And this is actually the language of the conference itself, of the assembly itself, that there's a pilgrimage, a movement toward justice and peace. It's not let's unite first and then move. Let's move and work on uniting as we move. And I think the Orthodox Church is now moving in a very deliberate way with the other Christian churches here in Korea, and moving also within the public sphere of Korean society. To be sure, it's still a very small church relative to even a single parish here in Korea with 800,000 members, as you probably know. It's a very small church in its numbers, but the WCC's 10th General Assembly, I think, has helped to propel this community forward and to enhance its image as a respected and constructive partner in responding to the challenges of Korea. Thank you very much. Be happy to hear questions. Yes. Tell me your name first.
Abby.
Abby, thanks.
You said you could talk a little bit more about the Orthodox Church in North Korea. Is it a real church? Is it a is it?
Yeah. So it's dedicated to Holy Trinity, and it's in Pyongyang, and was built by the Korean government, the North Korean government. So that probably answers your question. However, from what I know, there's only one Roman Catholic church in North Korea, officially, and there are only 2 Protestant church buildings in North Korea, and so it's a pretty big deal to be able to say, there is one Eastern Orthodox church that's there. It is functioning, and it's functioning primarily with people from the Russian embassy. So it is a real church in that sense, but unfortunately it's not real in the sense that it's actually able to reach out or teach or baptize or welcome the citizens of North Korea into it. So that, of course, the government has assigned a certain number of people to be the Orthodox in numbers. So you have your Orthodox here, and you have your Protestants, and you have your Catholics, and you have your traditional Korean, and they all actually get the same instructions from their supervisor within the North Korean government. So it's a very, yeah.
Is it under the Moscow or the Korean?
No. Yeah, that's a really important question. So maybe turn the video camera off here. No. So officially, these are the facts. The facts are that it was built by the North Korean government. The Orthodox metropolis of Korea here, that's not Moscow, but the Ecumenical Patriarchate, sent lots of supplies. They sent air conditioners and cranes and to furnish the church, like all kinds of materials. All that was sent with the money of the people of the Orthodox Church here in South Korea. So and because the Ecumenical Patriarchate officially has jurisdiction here, that church is under Metropolitan Ambrosios. However, because there's such a huge presence of Russian diplomats in North Korea, there have been instances. If you Google Orthodox Church in North Korea, you're going to see all this stuff about Russia. And Russia, they know how to use the media well, and they have occasionally sent priests there from the Moscow Patriarchate under the auspices of meeting the pastoral needs of their diplomats, and they've done some things that they probably shouldn't have done, or they've done without the permission of the bishop, the presiding bishop. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Great question though. Yes.
Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thank you.
Great project. So I have a couple of questions
Yeah.
for you. The first is, why is the Orthodox Church in Korea so marginalized? Because if I have the numbers right, about a third of Koreans here are Christian. They're either Roman Catholic or
Protestant.
Protestant or
Yes.
some sort of variation of that. So why is it that only about 5,000 people have access to this community,
Yeah.
or are willing to get into this Christian denomination?
Yeah.
And the second is, what is the Orthodox Church's relationship to mainstream Christians here? So, like the big mega churches in Korea, like Unri, Saregue, like they tend to be, Yoichungbe, like they're the churches that have sort of like thousands upon thousands of congregants coming into their churches weekly, right? So,
Sure.
what is the sort of cultural or theological relationship between the Orthodox Church and what I would see as mainstream Christianity in Korea?
Yeah, both really good questions. In terms of the first question, it's always hard to answer those types of questions in any comprehensive way, but I think there are a lot of factors that contribute. First of all, the Orthodox Church worldwide has not dedicated in recent centuries, has not dedicated the resources to mission and evangelistic initiatives in the way that Protestant and Roman Catholic churches have, especially Protestant churches. So there was not a lot of, there were very limited resources coming in from abroad after the Korean War and during the time when Christianity in Korea was really being revitalized. Another factor is certainly the historical, cultural roots of Eastern Orthodoxy, oftentimes being connected to another national identity, like Russia or Greece, or those would be the two main. There's no theological, let me just be very clear, there's absolutely no theological restriction on people joining the Orthodox Church in Korea. Any Korean can join the Eastern Orthodox Church in Korea. The worship is conducted almost 100% in Korean, and there are liturgies that are held in Slavonic to meet the needs of those folks. But so there are no formal restrictions. But I think culturally, those barriers existed in the earlier years of the presence of Orthodoxy here, and those who came were oftentimes a single individual to try to meet all the needs of the faithful, and they weren't able even to really learn Korean well. And that became a major barrier to its ability to teach and bring in new members. So I would say, and this is not just an Orthodox thing, I think you probably know from your own experience too, that many Christian churches in Korea are family. There are large families that are members. Like our family goes to this church and another family goes to another. It's kind of like, so they're almost like this, there's this kind of, can be a kind of clannish character to some of the churches here. And there are several large families within the Orthodox community that I think have been the kind of backbone, but also sometimes that presence of large families within a parish community doesn't enhance the missionary mindset as much as it might otherwise be. So I think that's another factor. But what's striking to me is how Koreans describe, the Koreans that are members of the Orthodox Church, how they describe their path to coming to the Orthodox Church. And oftentimes it's through the study of church history. They're looking for, ancient Christianity. They're looking for something that's aesthetically much more rich and less flashy and less superficial and less theatrical. The Orthodox Church feels very old and slow and mystical. So I think those are all factors that it doesn't appeal to the masses, but it definitely appeals to those who are spiritual seekers who are willing to kind of do their homework. And then your second question was the Orthodox Church's relationship to some of the megachurches in Korea. There's no formal difference in relationship between some of these churches and the Orthodox than there is between the Orthodox and the member churches of the National Council of Churches Korea, the more mainline Protestant denominations. There's no formal difference. Culturally, the Orthodox Church does not share the Eucharist with non-Orthodox. So anyone can become Orthodox and participate in the Eucharist, but if you're not Orthodox, you can't participate in the Eucharist in an Orthodox church. So oftentimes, because of that, Orthodox don't go to Protestant churches because the Eucharist is typically offered to everyone, and it's kind of an expectation or something like this. So that's one factor. I think culturally, it's just a very different mindset. Within the Orthodox Church, worship, a typical worship service lasts an hour and a half to 2 hours, of which about 10 to 15 minutes is preaching. The rest is all worship. Petitions, community prayer, and hymns, and things like this. So it's a very different kind of experience. So people who are coming out of Pentecostal or evangelical backgrounds are often it takes a lot of time to kind of adjust to the atmosphere of Orthodox Christianity. So, but yeah, great, thanks. Other questions? I know you're probably ready for refreshments, but yeah, tell me your name again.
I'm Lewis.
Lewis, nice to see you.
Going back to North Korea.
Yes.
So I know that WCC, Social Justice and Peace is a very primary goal with WCC and a lot of other organizations.
Sure.
How do you see the proposed procedure of reconciliation or that method of collaboration kind of happening with all things considered, or even when in 2013 or some recent events that happened?
Well, I don't. If I had an answer to that, I'd probably get the Nobel Prize, right? I don't have an answer to that. I think the WCC really tried to pull out all the stops to make this be more than what actually happened. There was even a quote unquote peace train that traveled through Europe and through and into North Korea, was they had their festivities, but I think basically there was no coverage of it. There was no response by no substantive response. They really tried to do everything they could. I don't think that.
And also even just ideally.
Well, here's one thing I will say. Part of what makes the situations different from South Africa, for example. There are many differences, of course, but one of them is just the Christian presence. In the context of South Africa and apartheid, it was possible to make, some very strong claims to appeal to the consciences of local Christians, by the WCC in a way that really isn't possible, I think, in North Korea today. That's one big difference. So I don't think that the WCC is going to be able to do much with respect to North Korea. it needs to continue to keep it on the table. It needs to continue to, you know, do what it can but I don't think that we're going to see anything dramatic or mind-blowing in terms of real peace progress or reconciliation, unfortunately. There may be a tremendously large role for the WCC if and when the regime falls, because then there will be major pastoral needs